its beginnings were humble.
State-of-the-art gaming when I was young was a Ziploc bag with a Xerox cover sheet and a hand-copied disc stuck in the Ziploc bag.
The whole concept of the home PC was really just emerging.
But it eventually becomes one of the biggest gaming platforms of all time.
PCs, it's in the neighborhood of like 100 million homes in the US, and about 60 million of those are playing games, which is just a phenomenal number.
There are a few snags along the way.
Of course, they got it badly wrong because most of the games just frankly.
Nobody's ever going to want to play games on, something that's so obviously a business machine.
DOS was not fun. DOS was not fun for most people.
But like any good story, it beat the odds and came out on top.
They literally, within a very small number of years, became the ubiquitous, platform for gaming.
This is the rise of PC gaming.
This kid just got a video game for Christmas. This kid just got a Commodore home computer.
It's the early 1980s, and a relatively new product is making its way into people's homes, thanks to companies like
Atari, Commodore,
IBM, and Apple.
Sophisticated for advanced needs.
Well, the gaming systems were at the time were Commodore 64. In the UK, the Sinclair Spectrum was massive, although it didn't really take off over here. Apple IIe was obviously a place where a lot of current game developers got their start playing games and starting on that platform.
The Apple and the Commodore were machines that were, on the one hand, very capable, and on the other hand, very simple. In my case, I worked on the Apple more than the Commodore personally, but there was a time when I knew every single solitary byte of memory on the machine, and in the ROMs, what every single solitary part of the ROM did, and in RAM and special hardware addresses, I knew exactly what those did as well.
Some of the Apple IIe stuff has really spawned ideas that are still there today. I mean, you had Bard's Tale for the role-playing games.
The next step probably was the Atari 800 series of home computers. When our first games were all released on the Ataris, and we thought that was a great game machine, but Commodore basically outsold it pretty quickly in the mid-'80s and became the preeminent game machine for a while.
Oh, a final argument for the Commodore 64 or VIC-20. Someday, both kids will be looking for a job.
For creative individuals, it was something that could be easily mastered and therefore could allow a great deal of creative expression.
The early days of computer gaming are anything but spectacular.
Well, there weren't big computer stores with masses of marketing dollars behind the product in the first place, and so they would be tucked away as computers in general were just sort of starting out. The whole concept of the home PC was really just emerging. A lot of the games were in envelopes or
a Ziploc bag with a Xerox cover sheet and a hand-copied disc stuck in the Ziploc bag. And usually these games were just hung on pegboard, so to speak, at the local computer shop.
And a lot of that stuff was just done by mail. A lot of the business was run by mail, where fans, who were a very small community of people, would be able to just send their $10 to Richard Garriott, and he would probably personally stick the game in the envelope and mail it off.
When I was young, that's how I actually first got into the business, was self-publishing, spending what I thought was a huge amount of money, $200 on Ziploc bags and Xerox cover sheets, and published my first game by hanging it on the pegboard at the computer store. But that was truly state-of-the-art. I mean, it looked every bit as good as the other few game companies that were out there making games at that time.
Well, the development cycle of games in the early period was very short. Basically, it was, one guy working a year or so and getting out a game. In those days, all you needed in order to have distribution was some kind of a Xeroxed or a mimeographed manual, sometimes offset if you were really upscale.
But that doesn't stop early developers from making their mark.
There were actually some pretty famous games that went out that way. The original Castle Wolfenstein by Silas Warner, that went out in those days in a Ziploc bag. Richard Garriott's first game, Calibeth, that California Pacific put out, had a very plain-looking cover. It looked, almost like the early D&D books. Some kind of art that you'd be ashamed to put on a school project today.
In 1982, Richard Garriott is among the first to push the industry forward.
During the era of Ziploc bags, very quickly, the Ultimas that I was making became bigger in the sense of they were bigger games. They took more time and more effort to make than most of the other games at that time, which were coin-op arcade game knockoffs. I was actually the first person to say, I don't really want this in a Ziploc bag. I want my game in a box. And not only do I want it in a box, but I want things like a cloth map of the world, and I want instruction manuals to describe the rich history of the world, and I think all these materials kind of lend to the reality of this virtual world that I want people to go explore. And Sierra was the only company that would guarantee me the materials they wanted my game to be in. So that's why Ultima 2 was published by Sierra, and Ultima 2, I believe, was the first boxed PC game.
Meanwhile, as computer games began getting bigger and Apple, Commodore, and Atari are duking it out, IBM releases a new PC that will change everything. In 1984, the IBM PC-AT is released. It is IBM's most powerful system yet. It is a step up from the previous IBM PCs that have already established themselves as business machines. But it's behind the curve when it comes to gaming. The game industry itself is hardly impressed by Big Blue's new entry.
Well, the IBM PC was a business machine. It was there to be a typewriter, a word processor. It was there to be a computer and not an entertainment device. And so it was probably very tough in the first place to say, yes, I'm going to use my several $1,000 piece of equipment to play Pong.
When the PC first came out, me and the other developers, of course, picked up the machine and sat down and played with it, and we thought, oh man, this machine is slow, it's a big box, don't like the keyboard. I was actually very skeptical that it would succeed in the marketplace. And it came into a marketplace that already was thick with competitors. We produced the Ultima just before the PC's launch on the Apple, on the Commodore, on like the Atari ST, 5 or 6 different platforms, and the last of those 6 was the IBM PC.
But this big, bulky machine soon proves them wrong.
People had become comfortable with computers through the Apple II and the C64 and the Atari 800, but now they wanted something that was meatier, something that was more powerful, something that could do their work in time-shifting frame, but could also give them some really challenging games.
Thanks to its upgradability and its reputation as a legitimate business machine, the IBM PC and its scores of compatible clones muscles its way into the gaming industry.
And when Starflight came around and showed you can actually make games for it all, there still was a lot of resistance and reluctance. But, it was inevitable, I think, because people got them into their homes and spent thousands of dollars justifying it as a business machine, and then suddenly it had, these powerful gaming capabilities.
When software giant Sierra lends their support, things are never the same.
When Sierra made their commitment, they began to push the technology of the IBM. They were the first ones to do an animated adventure game on the IBM that required EGA color. So the EGA color with the King's Quest I was a really big step up.
As more and more people are buying PCs, more and more game publishers jump on board.
When Bing Gordon of Electronic Arts said, what we're seeing is that the buyers aren't buying as many games. We aren't seeing the penetration we're hoping for. So we're putting our ace on the IBM PC. And when Electronic Arts made that decision to go primarily PC with every release, basically that was the nail in the coffin for the other machines.
Meanwhile, as PC gaming rises, so does console gaming. But it soon becomes apparent that the two forms of entertainment appeal to very different types of gamers.
As far as the games themselves, I think that the PC games pander to a slightly older audience in general. So there is an assumption that a console gamer is perhaps a younger audience, perhaps teens, and that PC gamer is a little bit older, and so therefore demands and expects a certain different type of game.
And the IBM-compatible PC continues to evolve. One of the first steps is the introduction of sound cards in 1984, with the Sound Blaster card setting the standard in 1989.
But it really was, the Sound Blaster was the first really competent sound creation that was also created at a reasonably modest price point. Very quickly, all the development community jumped on board saying, hey, finally at last, our games, which have been improving rapidly in areas like graphics and gameplay, but had really been lagging far behind in audio.
Know that the time has finally come.
It was a much needed step forward that since all the developers jumped on board, therefore all the consumers jumped on board.
By the early 1990s, the IBM PC is booming as a game machine. Everything from role-playing games to flight sims and adventure games is available.
Now, in the early 90s, we had the speed of machine, the high resolution of graphics, and in general, the technology to be able to tell these graphical stories the way, King's Quest. Even the Ultima games.
Stand back! Backlin! I shall outline my plan to destroy Britannia.
And Wing Commander were able to do very well.
With Doom, one of the biggest keys there, aside from the fact that it was a huge step forward as far as the graphic capabilities that we'd seen on a PC, we could see these colors, we can hear these sounds, we could have a very impactful experience playing it because it was frankly terrifying. On top of that, there was the multiplayer, and the fact that you could actually link up a couple of machines in an office and play.
The Secret of Monkey Island was just absolutely a fabulous experience because it was just hilarious. Alone in the Dark, which was one of the first real 3D adventures. Even though it was polygon looking and as blocky as could be, there were elements of that game that were just spooky. Of course, it's the one that really pushed 3D adventure gaming.
But PC gaming is not without its flaws. One of the biggest headaches for PC gamers is DOS, the operating system that IBM PCs have been using since they first appeared in 1981.
Oh, well, we all hated DOS.
DOS was not fun. DOS was not fun for most people. But unless you have some kind of 3 higher-level degrees in programming, knowing exactly what those commands are to get things to work is just a nightmare for everybody involved.
It's incredibly laborious. You had to, you put in the disk and you have to type, A colon, I don't even remember, I think I've blacked out purposely, but you had a whole string that you had to type in that was almost Unix-like in its obscurity, just to get the game running or loading into your system. It was a great pain.
But the solution to all these problems is just around the corner. As the PC continues to build momentum through 1995, the need for a uniform standard in PC software and hardware becomes apparent. The solution is Windows 95. Thanks to this new operating system and DirectX, the PC industry has a standard that helps ensure PCs will run smoothly and reliably.
The coming of more standardized 32-bit platforms, and particularly Windows, was a really great thing for computer games.
It's great to be able to stick in that CD and expect it to work and not have driver issues.
Ready, go!
That's good for everybody because nobody wants to futz around with their operating system when they're actually trying to have entertainment time.
And so all of a sudden, everybody's running Windows all the time. There's no more DOS. We were instantly free of all of the QEMN exceptions, of all of the configuring your autoexec.bat and your config.sys. You could just install Windows 95 on any machine that would run it, put Civ2 on, and away you'd go. It would perform great, it wouldn't crash, and that was just fantastic.
Around the same time that Windows 95 is getting on its feet, another innovation debuts, the CD-ROM drive.
All of a sudden you needed a medium that could include the increases in the graphics cards and the sound technology. All of a sudden you need to be able to pack that software so tightly that they would no longer fit on 1, 2, or even 6 floppy disks. And so a new storage medium was definitely needed.
And with the CD-ROM's introduction is an entire line of games featuring full motion video, or FMV. One of the biggest sellers is a game called Myst.
The way that I saw it happen most often was that someone wanted to buy one of these new CD-ROM drives or a new computer with a CD-ROM drive, and they were fairly expensive when they first came out, so you wanted to be able to rationalize it somehow. And Myst was, one of the best ways of showing, what a CD-ROM drive could do.
Myst was sold because it showed what you could do with a CD-ROM game. It was a new technology that showed graphics that had just never been seen before, and those incredible vistas that were created in the Myst world. You needed the CD-ROM storage medium to be able to fit all that kind of content that was being created. I think that Myst absolutely helped drive CD-ROM sales.
Competitors soon follow.
Rebel Assault was our very direct attempt to capitalize on that. We were looking at the technology and figured we've got to use the Star Wars stuff to make that work. The Seventh Guest, I think, was another one that was in the early days.
But FMV becomes more of a curse than a blessing.
My, isn't this a cheery place?
What happened there was, I think a lot of marketing people thought, hey, Hollywood, this is what it's all about. Creating movies on your screen and being in that is what it's all about. And of course they got it badly wrong because most of the games were just frankly
Lord, it smells awful too.
Performances were wooden.
You don't ever have to be afraid of anything.
And the technology as a gameplay mechanic really wasn't there to make them fun games.
While CD-ROM drives established themselves on PCs, another piece of hardware will become standard for gamers, the 3D accelerator.
The accelerator meant that the games look better, and frankly, most people respond immediately to whatever the visual stimulus is. If a game looks good, then people are going to stop and look at it. The 3D accelerator made a monumental leap to allow these games to suddenly start looking more real, and therefore attract a much broader audience.
3D accelerators have made a huge difference in the whole, all the way across gaming. 3D hardware was the first big breakthrough to really radically speed up and radically increase the resolution of the possibilities of doing 3D imagery.
There were probably a couple of killer apps that really got the 3D craze up and running. One would be the original Tomb Raider, which you could compare the software version with the 3D accelerated version, and this was night and day. And then there was also action games like Quake. The texture detail was all of a sudden amazing. All of a sudden the characters looked better and felt like they had that extra dimension, and actually made a real impact on how the games felt to the gamer.
And the number of PC gamers keeps on growing.
So I'm going to give you kind of ballpark figures. It's in the neighborhood of like 100 million homes in the US having PCs, and about 60 million of those are playing games, which is just a phenomenal number. It's probably about 20 million that are playing the big budget real games that you see at retail,
There are hardcore PC gamers who are buying our magazine every month, and there's 500,000 of those people. But there's also PC gamers who are perhaps playing hearts and spades in the Yahoo room, or doing trivia games through Pogo or any of those community sites. Technically, they're PC gamers. They're using their PC to play games. There are millions and millions of those. Tens of millions.
As technology advances, the PC continues to grow.
It's still the most impressive platform that even with the consoles, maybe the first year consoles come out, they look better than the PC, but it's the tortoise and the hare.
And consoles absolutely have various advantages, but it is a very different experience to play something on the PC. The relationship that you have with your PC and your mouse and your keyboard as you're controlling You sit 3 feet away from that monitor, and it's a different mindset and different immersion level than it is if you're kicking it on the couch with a console controller.
Massively multiplayer games bring together thousands of gamers. New 3D accelerators from companies like NVIDIA are pushing the graphical envelope. And games like Deus Ex 2 are blending old genres to create new experiences. The future is looking more realistic every day.
For the PC in the future, I think there's going to be more connectivity, there's going to be higher resolution graphics.
The PC keeps getting better and better, keeps getting faster, more memory, and for the foreseeable future, certainly the next 5 to 10 years, that's just not going to change. PC is going to be with us for quite a while.
We're approaching the LZ. It's gonna be hot. Touchdown, hit it, Marines!
I would love to see a PC future where massively multiplayer online games were successful as a business, where that instead of asking people what their sign was in a bar, they would ask what game they were playing, what guild they were a member of.
It's just very exciting. The more connectivity, the more memory, the more graphic speed and power, the better the experience we can deliver, and that's great.